the decision has been all but made in the White House that this is going to happen through reconciliation, and everybody seems to be fine with that. All the polling shows that the American public doesn't give a crap whether it is 51-50 or 60-40. They don't care. We're in the middle of a pandemic. We want help to fight the pandemic, help to keep people safe, help for people to pay their bills, stay in their homes. I mean, on and on. And they do not care about what the procedural methodology is for voting for it. Nobody cares about reconciliation. They just don't.
They don't care if their check comes in a purple envelope or a blue one. I mean, that's essentially what this comes down to.
I think people would probably even care more about the color of the envelope than that. In fact, just so that, like, if when we talked about the Republicans passing the tax cuts, if we talked about the notion of reconciliation, that they passed it through reconciliation, beyond like just explaining things like we do here, I would be shocked. If the words ever came out of my mouth like, this is unfair, the American public is not going to like the fact that it's passed in reconciliation. I don't even think we said that for those tax cuts that went just to millionaires and billionaires.
Well, you're engaging on the substance of it as opposed to the procedure, which seems to be oftentimes the religious focus of Democrats. But even like we're seeing as they water down the income threshold, you have Janet Yellen going on cable news saying, what about 60,000? I don't know. Joe Manchin pushing for 50,000 as he is the senator from the poorest state in the country. Like, that is a function of obsession over procedure and, you would say, branding. Well, we can't just,
It's absurd. It's totally absurd. And
we have to debate and change. And then
here is Joe Biden talking with Norah O'Donnell on CBS News about the idea of the $1,400 checks, which we already know should be $2,000. And now they're quibbling over who gets them. And I mentioned the other day that David Dayen wrote in his piece that there's been a study and the difference is really just $65 billion. Why? Because a certain amount of this is going to get clawed back by people whose taxes go up in 2020 because they're made more money or whatnot. It's just, we're talking about like relative to the bailout package and just the American budget. I mean, just almost no money here. It's just a question of whether you want, well, here, play this clip.
You've said you're not compromising on the $1,400 checks. You made that promise. You're sticking to it. So the big question is who gets the check?
Exactly right.
Is it someone who makes up to $50,000 or is it someone who makes up to $75,000?
I'm prepared to negotiate that, but here's the deal. Middle-class folks need help. But you don't need to get any help to someone making $300,000 or $250,000. So it's somewhere between an individual making up to $75,000 and phasing out, and a couple making up to $150,000 and phasing out. But again, I'm wide open on what that is.
All right. I mean, and I think the numbers he's talking about, 75 to 150, are reasonable. I mean, obviously, he's right. You don't want to give money to people at $250,000. They don't need it. But here's the problem. And this is why, like, you're going to err on one way or the other, right? I mean, this is always the dilemma in any type of public policy that isn't, broadly universal. Now, you could give it to people who are making $250,000 and you just have to increase taxes, which would be the easy way to do it. But they don't want to spend that money. Fine. You're going to err one way or another. You're either going to not give the money to people who desperately need it, small number of people, we don't know, and by small number we mean like maybe tens of thousands, maybe 100,000 of people who did well in 2019, didn't do as well in 2020 because pandemic, and they're going to be really, really hurting. Or you're going to give money to people who are doing perfectly fine. They're just going to put it in their savings bank. The extra, the $1,400 or whatever. There's going to be some number of those people. Even if there was like 6 people who didn't need it and 4 people who desperately did need it, and you're giving it to the 6 so that you can make sure you give it to those 4, why not? Claw it back later from those people who didn't need it with taxes. They're going to put it into the economy eventually. It's not going to hurt anything. It's just supposedly some people's sense of justice. But the fact is that I would give it to 6 people who didn't need it to help to make sure that 4 people who desperately do need it get it. That's the whole point of this. It's the pandemic relief.
Well, yeah, targeting and means testing this. I mean, it's already means tested. Only bogs it down, and it only makes senators, as you say, get to contribute to their personal brand as being fiscally responsible. I mean, the idea that Manchin is seemingly central to this, when Virginia is 50th out of 50 in poverty, and he's the one that's being one of the top Democrats that's trying to push this threshold down. It's just insanity to me. And obviously then you have limousine liberals like Mark Warner, who are doing that. I haven't used that term in a while. But it's nonsense. And from a purely political perspective, it's also incredibly risky for zero reward. Zero. And that's why you have John Ossoff, who is progressive, who is making this case and hammering this like, no, I made this promise. Yeah. I got to Washington based on these $2,000 checks. They're not even $2,000 at this point. It's the difference. And now Biden's marketing it as such. Like, he's going to Biden and saying, we cannot change this threshold. And I think Bernie Sanders and also Ron Wyden are also leading that charge.
Here's
as well.
Sanders on State of the Union, CNN State of the Union, making the case that like what are we doing here? Really good.
And what we need to do is have a strong cliff so it doesn't kind of spill over to people making $300,000. And that's what I support. And that's what I think most people understand. But to say to a worker in Vermont or California or any place else that if you're making, $52,000 a year, you are too rich to get this help, the full benefit, I think that that's absurd. And it's also, from a political point of view, a little bit absurd that you would have under Trump these folks getting the benefit, but under Biden, who is fighting hard for the working class of this country, they would not get that full benefit. So I think from a policy point of view, we've got to do the right thing, and that's $75,000 and $150,000 for a couple. From a political point of view, it is absurd to be telling working class people, somebody has a decent union job, they're making $55,000, $60,000, sorry, you're not eligible for the program. Makes no sense to me at all, nor do I think it makes sense to the American people.
It is Biden punching himself in the face by entertaining this.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Bernie makes a great point. You really want Donald Trump to have been better about this?
Apparently, there's a 40 million person gap in between that 75 and 50 threshold. So those 40 million people would have ostensibly received a check under Trump and then not under Biden.
Yep.
That's the political cost. And what will those people do? What will their voting decisions be based on that? For what reason?